I guess what they say is true. Humans are the real monsters. Supernatural, Season 15, Episode 15, Gimme Shelter. We're coming down to the wire now. Now we have to start looking at these episodes like, are these the kind of episodes we want to see 5, 6, 7 episodes away from the end? After this episode, we only have 5 episodes left. And that's a big milestone we're hitting. We're in the last 5, the home stretch. What are my thoughts on this episode as it applies to that home stretch? This is the second episode in a row where I didn't feel like we made a ton of progress on the main quest. Yes, the last episode was a complete bottle episode where it was all self-contained in that episode. It didn't end up impacting the main story at all, but this one had a couple of elements that are going to be important coming towards the end, but the overall arc of the episode wasn't super impactful. Most of the episode was centered around Jack and Cass going to investigate this series of murders. And it was interesting. It was an interesting little kind of murder mystery that we had to go on. And then the B plot actually ended up being the plot that had the most impact, because the B plot was Sam and Dean going to Atlantic City to try and track down Amara. Why is that important, you might ask? Well, if they have the plan to try and take out God, well, you need to take out the darkness as well. If Chuck is going to go down, Amara's got to go down, because without that, you have an imbalance. And if there's an imbalance in the universe, then there's going to be a little bit of a shit show. Because we've seen that in the past. We've seen when Amara was locked up, and then we saw when Amara came back out and she had more power than Chuck at the time and was not able to kind of bring that balance together. It was chaos. We don't want a repeat of that. But in order to try and kind of keep this balance, they're going to have to take them out at the same time. And that involves somehow tricking Amara into helping them defeat Chuck and kind of walking into her own death. Before I get into the Amara plotline a little bit more, because then that's going to be kind of spoiler heavy as to what happened, I'm going to touch on the A plot, which you'd think would normally be the B plot considering who it was involving, but it was the one to take up the majority of this episode. And that A plot was Cass and Jack going to investigate the member of this religious organization in a small town that was murdered. It didn't look like it was monsters involved, so Sam and Dean kind of weren't going to participate in it, but they kind of looked at it as a way to get Cass and Jack out of the bunker, away from what they were going to do with Amara, and it kind of got Jack, he likes that kind of detective role, so he got to go out and play detective with Cass. Of course, there was some interesting things when he tried to introduce himself as an FBI agent, and he said some weird things, and that's just what Jack is always going to do. But you got to see that dynamic between Cass and Jack, which is a great strength of the show, whenever they give them time to actually kind of get together and play off of each other. It's like a father-son dynamic with a little bit of a twist to it, because there's that weird history there. I'm going to get into spoilers now, so if you haven't seen the episode, go and watch it. If you just kind of want my overall thoughts on where I would place it, it was a fun episode. I'm a little bit leery of the fact that it's so close to the end of the series, because it didn't have a ton of impact. Yes, there were a couple of scenes, 2 in particular, that mattered in the overall plot of the series and where we're kind of heading towards, but for it to be only like the 6th from the end in terms of the order going towards the end of the series, I'm a little bit disappointed. But I try to look at this as this was all meant to be part of one season. So if I were to look at a normal Supernatural season, you would have your build-up episodes, you'd have your plot-heavy episodes, and then you would have a couple of contained episodes later on. I guess it's hard to look at it from the same perspective that I would look at a normal season, because it was split in half. But normally around this time, I guess around 14, 15, 16 of a normal length season, you would see some of these little bottle episodes, or these little episodes that let you just kind of hang out with the characters without the stakes kind of playing down on them. So if I look at it from that standpoint, then it's a good episode. I enjoyed it. If I look at it as we're getting close to the end, I'm waiting for stuff to happen. This didn't have a ton in there for me until we get to the end, and I'll discuss that in spoilers. So now that everyone who hasn't watched the episode has gone off and watched the episode and come back, or they just didn't care to begin with, let's talk a little bit about the actual plot of the episode. I'll start off with Jack and Cass. They go to investigate a murder that has to do with this religious organization. And it's a very open faith organization that does charity work and is helping the poor and running like kind of like a soup kitchen kind of charity thing. And one of their members has been murdered. Then another member gets murdered. And we're kind of talking to the pastor, and we're talking to the pastor's daughter and some of the members. And they kind of try to figure out what's happening. And as this progresses, you get to see a little bit of where they're taking their influences for this episode. This episode seems like it's taking some influences from Seven, some influences from Saw, and kind of mashing them together a little bit. They stress a couple of times that it's not a monster case because it doesn't look like a monster case. And of course they go in there and they try to, look at it from a monster perspective, but like the signs keep pointing towards it being a human. They even pull out a crossroads demon, which we haven't seen in a while. I can't recall the last time we actually had them go out to a crossroads, bury the box and try and summon a crossroads demon. And it was kind of a blast from the past when I got to see that, because I remember when crossroads demons were kind of that was top tier. Like, you didn't want to mess with them. And now they're kind of like, whatever, you're a crossroad demon. And now they're kind of a joke. And we get to meet Zach, the crossroad demon, through that. We get to hear a little bit about how hell is going under Rowena's rule, how she's kind of keeping it, orderly. She's not letting people leave. There's no like demons kind of getting out all over the place like it was under Crowley's rule. And we're definitely seeing that there's order down there. I don't know if that's going to come into play at any point, or if it's just kind of saying we don't have to worry about hell, where you're kind of looking at up there, not worrying about hell right now. So if that was just a throwaway line, though there was something towards the end of the episode that was a little bit, this has got to come up, I would imagine. But as we move along, we see one of the people being held in a chair that chops off their fingers because they were a thief that stole from the donations at the church. So they were being called a thief on this like screen, very, very Saw. Like, it had a screen, and on it would display the words thief over and over and over again, and it chopped off one of her fingers, and then there was a timer, and it kept chopping off fingers at certain points, and they were expecting somebody to rescue them, and nobody came to rescue them. I don't know how they would know that they were there. And then while you see Jack going to join this organization, kind of talking to some people, you see Cass talking to the pastor, and it's kind of, character moments. They get to open up. The pastor gets to open up about, being a father and what this organization meant to him and what it meant to his wife. And Cass gets to open up a little bit about being a father, and Jack gets to open up a little bit. And it's kind of those little conversations that get to help you get to know the characters. We know these characters already, but getting to see them in a new light. This is a different situation than what we've seen them in. There's kind of this ceremony where the people of the organization get together, and Cass is there, Jack is there, and they ask Jack to speak, because usually the newest member would be the one to kind of open up all of their meetings. And Jack kind of hesitates, and Cass takes over, kind of seeing that he was struggling. So he talks, and he talks about blindly listening to orders, and he talks about how, the way, the law, the plan was the thing that he always went by, and then everything fell apart, and he didn't know what to do. He didn't have any purpose, and he didn't know what his direction was. From an outsider's perspective, him saying all these things would make you believe that he's talking about, being a police officer or joining the FBI, whatever he's pretending to be an FBI agent. So that sort of rigid plan and that sort of way of acting and behavior, and that's kind of what it seemed like to somebody who doesn't understand what he's talking about. But he's obviously talking about God, talking about being an angel and living by God's plan. But then everything fell apart. God went missing. Heaven spit all of the angels out, and now God is their biggest enemy. And seeing what God actually views humanity and views his children and views everything as is kind of throwing Cass for a loop. That's everything he believed in and everything that he lived for, what he was created for. And now he can't really live up to that plan anymore. But he says he found a family, and in that family, he found purpose. In being a father, referring to Jack, he found purpose. And that's really what Supernatural always boils down to, is that aspect of family. Family becomes everything to the person involved in it. And we see that time and again with Dean, Sam. They view the bond with each other above everything else. They view Cass as a member of their family, and they view that bond above everything else. And as much as they might be angry at Jack and have feelings that are conflicted towards him, they view him as part of the family, and that bond is above everything. And that's when one of the moments towards the end of the episode really is going to throw a wrench into everything that they're going to do. But before we get to that, it turns out during this meeting that the screen starts to flicker and they see the person that is captured in this kind of torture device that's chopping off fingers. And they're like, taunting them to help her. Or why didn't you save her? I think that's what it said. And at that moment, Cass and Jack think they know who it is, because prior to that, Cass was talking to the pastor about a person that used to be in their AV person that would handle all of their tech stuff, and he left to go to another organization. So this is somebody who can obviously patch into their technology, so obviously it's somebody who has to do with that. So what do? You go to the guy's apartment to try and figure out what this guy has been up to. They bust into the apartment, and it turns out that he's dead and has been dead for quite some time. So that's your top suspect off the table right there. And above the bed, which he is handcuffed to, it says lust in blood. This is where I see the 7 connection. I think one of the other ones had greed. The one with the thief had greed. And so you kind of see that little bit of a connection there, plus the saw because of the devices. So definitely those are the influences. So now they're back to square one. Beyond that, the killer just outs themselves. Turns out, long story short, that the pastor's daughter is the one who's been killing everybody. You can kind of put 2 and 2 together after a little bit. They didn't really sprinkle a lot of clues. It wasn't really a murder mystery as much as it was just kind of a murder story, like a simple case that Jack and Cass could do and kind of bond through it. The pastor's daughter was upset that her father was not able to save their mother, who died of illness. The mother was so devout that she refused to go to a hospital, refused to get medical attention, and kind of was one of those people who just kind of wanted to pray the illness away. And she passed. And then after her mother died, her father went and took this organization and turned it away from the devout faith that her mother had to a more utilitarian kind of view, where they accepted all different faiths, and it was directed more towards about doing community good and things like that. And that was where she viewed this organization as going wrong, that they weren't really faithful anymore. This girl was definitely out there, but she made her motivations clear. They're wrong motivations, but she made them clear. The last shot we get of her is sitting in the back of a cop car, clutching her cross to her lips, and in the front seat we see that Zach, the Crossroads demon, is driving the car. Who knows if this will matter in the long run? I can't see this being super important in the long run, but it's possible. There was kind of a weird dynamic when Zach came out the first time, and he was kind of begging to come along. He was bored. He didn't know what he was supposed to be doing. He didn't like how hell was currently being arranged. So maybe we'll get an episode with Zach. I don't know. There's only 5 left, so I don't know how much time they can spend on Zach, the random Crossroads demon, but who knows? Definitely a possibility. Now let's move on to the B plot. This plot with Sam and Dean going to Atlantic City to track down Amara doesn't get very much screen time. It doesn't really need very much screen time, because turns out They stop at a pit stop about 6 hours away from their destination, and Amara just appears there. They didn't need to find her. She said she could smell Dean. And I don't know if that's a body odor joke or what it is, but Amara and Dean had this connection in the past. So I can definitely see her kind of tapping in that kind of connection to find him, as he's kind of obviously moving closer towards her. So they're going into this trying to convince her to come back and help them defeat Chuck. Meanwhile, that's a lie, because they plan on destroying her too. They have this conversation over pierogies at this random restaurant that was right near where the pit stop was. And she turns them down. She doesn't want to betray Chuck. She views it as a betrayal. She doesn't view her refusal to help him when he came to her as a betrayal, but she says that's different from actually outwardly trying to destroy him. And I can see the difference there. But Chuck is on the warpath. He is destroying universes, snapping them out of existence, and he's almost done. If he gets all those other ones done, then he's going to hit this one, and this is the last one that's left. What is there to do after that? Dean tries to appeal to the fact that Chuck locked her away, locked her in a cage for eternity, essentially. And she doesn't view that as a betrayal. She views that as something that really hurt him to do, but what he thought was the right thing. And she doesn't want to force that kind of pain on herself, going against Chuck and possibly destroying him, trapping him. They made it seem like they were going to contain him, but I think she knew that they were going to try and destroy him, and she didn't want to. So they leave. They get into the car, little back and forth between Sam and Dean, but there's something that's bothering Dean, and he just gets out, goes back in, and he laces into Amara. Mostly directed at the fact that she brought his mom back just for her to die again. And he wanted to know why. He wanted to know why he had to live through that loss all over again. Why she brought her back in the first place. What she was trying to teach him. And Amara explains that she wanted him to be able to move on past the idealistic view of his mother. The woman who died perfect to him. That she was human, that she was flawed just like anybody else, and he got to see that with Amara bringing her back to life. And even though he had to lose her again, he got to see that the life he would have had if she had not died would not have been this sunshine and rainbows perfect life, this like alternate family reality that he thought he could have had, and the thing that he was always kind of looking back to as a major regret. And he got to see what the life would be like with her. She was a hunter just like him, and just like his father. And she put herself out into those situations. She put herself into those hunts. And though it wasn't her fault that she died, it was definitely possible for her to have died several times. The life that they lived after she was brought back was just a continuation of the life they were already living. So it wasn't rose-tinted glasses on what could have been. And he said he's angry. He said he's furious. And he just wants to stop the destruction of this universe, the loss of everybody that he loves. And somewhere in this emotion that he gives towards Amara, he promises that he would never lie to her, that she could trust him. Somewhere in that, Amara sees a nugget that makes her reconsider, and she says she'll think about it. We don't get a definite answer, but the fact that she changed her mind from a hard no to a maybe implies that she'll kind of come around. And you see Dean straight up lie to her, straight up lie to her face that that he would never hurt her. And meanwhile, their plan is to kill them both. So obviously this is going to come to a head at some point, and that's kind of the plot relevant part that we got. The other moment that we got towards the end of the episode was the conversation between Jack and Cass as they were driving home from the case, where Jack says that Billy's plan is not for him to become strong enough to defeat God and Amara in like a straight up fight. It's to turn him into a bomb. And he's not going to survive that. Cass, of course, has kind of a little bit of an emotional breakdown and says he doesn't want to lose him again. He can't go through that again. He's lost him once. He doesn't want to lose him again. And Jack says it's not your choice. It's my choice. This is the only alternative. I don't know any other method that we can accomplish what we wanted to accomplish. And he tells Cass not to tell Sam and Dean. This is something we live through constantly on Supernatural, where some party knows information, refuses to tell the other one, drama ensues. But the one saving grace that I get out of this is the last scene of the episode, right before we cut to credits, is Cass is about to leave, tells Dean that he's looking for another plan. He's looking for something else that can defeat God, besides Jack having to sacrifice himself. And we don't hear him tell Dean, but he says, if I don't come back, there's something you need to know. And then we cut to the credits, which I assume means Cass is going to tell Dean, and we're going to handle that in the next episode. But we didn't even have to live through a full episode of them hiding this information, which I feel like I would not have wanted to see because we don't have time for that. We only have 5 episodes left. So overall, spoilers and everything taken into account, what do I think of the episode? I think it was a good episode from a earlier in the season perspective. I don't like to see it this close to the end, but we needed those 2 moments. Those 2 moments are pivotal. Finding out that Jack is willing to sacrifice himself, and that's the plan, and that's the thing they've been gung-ho towards the entire season, that's going to end up leading to some problems, because Cass doesn't want to sacrifice him, and neither will Sam and Dean, and that might lead to that moment of hesitation. Just like when Sam had the ability to kind of finish off Chuck early on in the season, and he balked at that opportunity because he saw what was going to happen, and like Chuck was showing him all these images, and he kind of believed what was going to happen, and he decided not to. And a lot of people have died because of that. Billions of people on other universes have died because of that decision, or at least somewhat involved in that decision. And we are probably going to see something similar to that come towards the end. They're going to have to find another solution, because I don't see them being willing to sacrifice Jack. The other thing that we got out of this is Amara, and we see that Dean is willing to lie to her and get her to kind of help them out. And with Amara's help, I can see them pulling this off against Chuck, but I don't see how they're going to take them both out unless they're willing to sacrifice Jack at this point. I'm assuming we'll get some kind of information that'll be an alternate, and I feel like there has to be some death towards the end of this. We're building up to some sacrifices. I'm just wondering who it's going to be. If you're liking these Supernatural reviews, then definitely hit that like button. I love those thumbs up. Comment down below. What are your thoughts on the latest episode? Have you been watching this season? What do you think is going to happen towards the finale of this series that we have been waiting 15 years for? And subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell so you know what's up, and I'll catch you in the next review, guys.